Hello, product people. Welcome to the Product for Product podcast, hosted by Matt Green, data advocate and product manager, and Moshe product leader and author. Our goal is to serve the product community by helping you find products that can help make your work in product management easier. Thanks for joining us on another episode of the Product for Product podcast.
Welcome back. We're happy to have CJ Burns on the show to talk about the tool Shortcut and how it's being used for backlogs and agile boards. CJ is the director of product at LTK. How are you doing, CJ?
Living the dream, man. Nice to be chatting with y'all this morning.
Awesome. Thanks so much for being here. Hey, Moshe, how are you?
I'm good. Just got positive to COVID, so look at the dedication I have to the show.
You are very dedicated. Thank you for doing this. Thank you for doing this. Before we hop into what Shortcut does for us and what it does for product managers, let's go ahead and learn more about you and the work you're doing at LTK.
Awesome, man. So I've been over at LTK now for almost 7 years. I am the director of product for our brand platform. And so LTK is split across kind of 3 different verticals, really aligned against our personas. So we've got one group on creator, one group on consumer, and a final group focusing on brands. And really my job over in that side of the business now is to acquire, activate, and scale brands. And so it's all about average revenue per account and converting new customers into the ecosystem so we can run the flywheel. It's a bunch of fun and a fast-paced environment where we're scaling from about 5 engineering squads to about 9 engineering squads just in my side of the business unit. And so really fast times at LTK at the moment, but it's a lot of fun and an amazing opportunity in the creator commerce space.
Very cool. You were working with a previous guest, continuing guest of ours, Ken Hansen. So it seems like
one of my product brothers, if you will.
Yes. Yeah, we love having Ken on the show. So that's great to hear. So Shortcut. So let's talk about Shortcut. Let's go ahead and hop into it. Shortcut is a product that is new to me. I had not heard of it prior to this. So let's talk about it and what kind of experience you have with it.
Well, I believe before we dive in, I believe that they changed their name recently, right?
Yeah, they were Clubhouse and they're now Shortcut. And
there we go.
Formerly Clubhouse was their solution. And to me, man, it's very similar to a Jira style tool or other project management tools that really allow you to do asynchronous project work and carry things through the SDLC process. And so really from concept to execution is that tracking tool to help keep everybody aligned, which becomes more and more important as you scale your team.
Mm-hmm. So tell us a bit about, let's dive a bit more into it. And I'm not sure if you have experience with other systems like Jira. So if you do, then that could also be helpful, to compare.
Yeah. So I've actually, before Jira was what we were on right before Shortcut, actually.
Okay.
And so we suffered, I think, some really interesting problems with Jira as we grew to an organization of like over 100 plus users that were in our Jira instance. And to be clear, I haven't used Jira now in almost 2 years after we switched. But really, its loading times really killed us. It really was difficult to build a constructive or useful roadmap view. It didn't support a lot of backend APIs and all of its integrations were out of the box and were just another nickel and dime against you when you wanted to go ahead and integrate Zendesk into Jira, or if you wanted to start pushing data into Jira for any given reason. Really that toll kind of charging mentality that the platform had made it, as we were looking at scaling, not really the right option for our company as we went from that awkward B stage company to C stage engineering organization. So we found ourselves, I think, at a crossroads where it was time for us to level up into a new tool. And Clubhouse was ultimately what we ended up deciding to go with, or Shortcut. It was Clubhouse at the time, to try and solve for some of those issues in our organization. And I think to speak to those particulars, it did do a wonderful job on helping us scale with more teams. And we probably now have, just for reference, about 250 people using our Shortcut instance working together asynchronously. And so creating that little bit better coordination and faster loading speed at that scale is something that Shortcut was definitely able to provide for us as we transferred over.
It's a very interesting observations. I never heard about those specific complaints, so it's really interesting to hear that, specifically about Jira and why someone would move away from Jira.
Yeah, that exactly. That's what I was thinking. I was thinking someone might move towards Jira, thinking that that's the industry standard and everyone needs to be on Jira. But that's really refreshing to hear. You decided to move away from it.
And I think one of the reasons why is because Shortcut has such an API-driven focus. Like, if you wanted to think about it, it's really the project management tool that thinks about devs from a persona first. And that might be both what I would say its benefits and part of where my qualms are with it as well. But because of that, it's all very data-driven and it's all very heavy payload. And the UI is probably almost a second thought in some ways for Shortcut, and which really allows for it to work well at scale with larger organizations.
How was the transition, like the implementation of it from Jira, like technically?
Yeah, that was really an interesting period for our teams. And so I was actually part of the incubator group which transitioned us over, and we chose to do with 3 different engineering squads effectively, where we put them in their next iteration. It's all right, we're going to be planning in Shortcut, and we're going to go ahead and move everything over. And we tried it for about 2 or 3 sprint cycles, which is for us about 2 weeks. And then from those learnings, we did a post-mortem and really just tried to understand, all right, how are we going to standardize our process inside our organization? Because it's not like Shortcut gives you a roadmap for how to best implement Shortcut. And I mean, that's probably fair because every SDLC process should fit your organization like a good suit. And so, but ultimately, we had to, each of our 3 different squads took a different way of thinking about epics or initiatives or how things laddered up. And so we really needed to go through that process of postmortem and understand, all right, as an organization, we need to be able to have certain types of unified views. What is the right asset in Shortcut to help us create that unified view for transparency across the business? And so ultimately, we did have like somebody that helped us implement post that like retro phase, if you will, and build that standardization documentation that could ultimately be part of like every dev, product, and designer's onboarding experience inside of LTK. And so we found that, in week 1, now part of the training is how do you use Shortcut? How do you properly model work in Shortcut? And it being that kind of continuous training process. But we now no longer need someone that is like the quote unquote implementation expert or the person that is constantly driving it. And it's instead more of an embedded distributed function once we set those guardrails that everyone agreed on.
Cool. And that's something we typically ask at the end of the show. How is their customer success or customer support? So was the implementation of it involving their customer success team?
No, it really wasn't.
Okay. Did you have any kind of experience with them along the way, or how were they in terms of, bringing the tool on board? Were they involved at all?
Limited to 0, pretty much. I will say that my experience with their customer success team has been lackluster, to be quite honest. So this is definitely a solution where you've got to be willing to go and roll your sleeves up and figure it out. They've got a great help center and things are well documented. But the majority of the interaction I've had with their customer success team has been around feature requests or things of that nature.
Okay. Well, that's good. That's good feedback. We like it all here. So that's great.
Yeah. It's a mixed bag with this one, quite honest.
Yeah. Okay.
Can you talk a bit more about what you mentioned before, the API, how it's API centered? What does that mean exactly?
Yeah. And so really, because everything in Shortcut also is modeled on its API side, it's possible, for example, for you to, if you wanted to even whip up your own monitors from Datadog that could say push and create a ticket to Shortcut from based on some type of outage report. It handles structured data so well that you could easily do that type of insert into Shortcut. And in the same token, when dealing with some of its foundations or loading boards of, 400-500 tickets, it happens quite instantly because it's all, really focused on the text and data payload rather than focusing on those visual assets at the different layers until you really get to like that final story level. And so it really provides a good experience in some ways from that perspective on just data load and data delivery.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And then it also gives you the flexibility that you mentioned you couldn't find in Jira. No, that's all very interesting. You did touch a bit on the UI, that is almost like an afterthought.
Yeah. And that was some of before I hopped on the show, I asked my team what feedback they would give. And I've recently hired about 4 product managers, and all of them would tell you the same thing, that Shortcut is not intuitive. And that it is not easy to learn. Now, granted, coming from like a Jira type of background where it was already a non-intuitive project management system, for me, I didn't feel like I had a long learning curve really trying to pick up the tool. But for a lot of my teammates, it's something where, the first 2 weeks, I really have them focus on learning how to use Shortcut properly to engage in the different SDLC activities that we're expecting them to do.
Can you tell us a bit about that? What does it mean? I know we are not visual, it's only audio here, but what does it really mean that it's not intuitive? What do you see in the system?
Yeah, so I think there's different types of things about it. Doesn't provide guidance on how to do like mass types of edits to tickets. It's not clear that one date field is going to affect how you might see this on the roadmap, or that if you don't fill out a certain data point, a ticket will not show up in a certain view. Or there are issues on like how you do relationships and task management and how you create those. Can also have some interesting complexity in that can be unclear what type of relationship you're making between 2 types of tickets. And then even further, it being impossible to relate certain things like epics except under like an umbrella initiative. And so there's moments where it's like my team, for example, one of my younger PMs was so confused why the user stories could be related in the same type of blocking or highly related or dependent upon, but at an epic level, entirely impossible. And so without using dates, for example, it can be very difficult to sequence epics from a prioritization perspective.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Now, I noticed they also have a documents feature. Are you also using this as, collaboration and wiki experience for your team?
We've tried it, and we have decided to maintain our Confluence license.
Okay.
Because ultimately, it's so poor when it comes to embedded assets that we are very much, when we are scoping things out, we really get highly visual, and we've got a lot of Figma, and we've got a lot of, we have a very visual and product on our side. And so because of that, what we'll often do is we'll do all of that wiki style documentation over in Confluence, and then link them in the epic where we might be doing exploration that was tied under the initiative, and then mirror some of the requirements in the description. But we really have not found that the docs feature is yet at the maturity that we're looking for.
Gotcha. Mm-hmm. And does your engineering team also leverage Shortcut, or?
Yes. So to be clear, our entire EPD leverages Shortcut. And by that, I mean our engineering, product, and design team. And so it really is that holistic point where those 3 people, or those 3 orgs, come together in our organization. We don't have like our marketing team in Shortcut. Our customer support team lives in Zendesk, but we use the APIs we were just talking about to be able to push customer support requests into Shortcut. And so, but it's largely for those kind of the 3-headed giant, if you will, of the engineering, product, and designers coordinating in that space.
Cool. And it looks like it does have an integration with Figma. I know we spoke with Wes recently about the tool Pivotal Tracker, and it didn't seem to have a really to support the design team. So
yeah, and our design team right now has been really appreciating. That's something that's been new in our process. We moved our design team into Shortcut about 8 months ago, and they love it. They think it is
awesome.
the best thing ever, and that they are now more connected to the dev work and better able to model out really all of the exploration and research and prototyping that they do, and create some clarity about, sometimes executives ask, what is design doing in that 4-week black box? And Shortcut is really providing a way for them to model and show and track that work in a way to build trust into the discovery process, which far and away is probably one of the best benefits that we didn't realize that Shortcut would give us.
Oh, okay. That's very cool.
Is it because they're using the same system as you are, or is it because of Shortcut specifically? Because as designers, they might not like the interface that you said it's not the best.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with the interface. It just has to do with the fact that they're in the system with
visibility.
Right.
Yeah. And so the interface works well enough, and they keep their things inside of Shortcut kind of light, but enough to create that visibility and transparency with other teams about the work that they're doing to prepare work. And one of the things that's so nice about that is just at the microcosm of a story, right? The definition of a story being ready for grooming is partially having a design that's ready for it. And so us being able to map that, these 15 stories that are against this team are actually blocked by these 12 design tickets that our team is slowly cranking through. And as each of those is finished, we're able to pop a story from a waiting state into ready for grooming, so that the team can be ready to action on that in their next grooming and refinement cycle.
That's a great insight and lesson to anyone listening. I don't think it really matters which system you're using, but to include your designers as part of the process.
Right.
So there is no reason why not. And actually, there is a lot of benefit in that, like you said.
Yeah, there's so much benefit. If anybody is listening here that isn't doing their project management in such a way to include their designers as part of the process, you're really missing half the story, at least from a product perspective.
Yeah. Now, what about the backlog? How does the backlog managed in Shortcut?
Oh man, now we're talking about my gripes. So Shortcut has this concept of teams and iterations that are worth talking about while we get into this. So a team is just a group of users that stories can be assigned against that can have multiple workflows. And so to start with, there is kind of a backlog view that exists on a team level, but it's really just a consolidated mess of stories in different states. And so because of that, and the fact that there is not the ability to prioritize stories outside of the state that they're in. So for example, it's impossible to say that a new story is a higher priority than a ready for development story, for example, in that kind of team level view. And so what that ends up leading towards is the concept of iteration backlogs, which an iteration in Shortcut is just the modeling of your sprint, if you will. And it's during this period as of defined, this work we're theoretically going to execute this work. But what we'll have to do is create placeholder sprints that are effectively called ready product backlog, if you will, and then prioritize inside of a sprint itself to say, no, these are actually the 12 or 15 stories, no matter the state they're in, that are the highest priority for the team. And I'm sure you can understand really quickly how that becomes monotonous and difficult. And so it's something that really for my PMs, I tell them that if they're not spending about 4 hours a week managing their teams in Shortcut and keeping the work clean and in the right state and moving, it can be very hard for devs to know which thing to pull off the top of the stack whenever capacity becomes ready. Yeah. And so to me, that's, I think, one of the biggest falling downs. The feature I loved in Jira that is just not there anymore for us in Shortcut was that global backlog feature that they had that allowed for you to just like cut the sprint line and then stack the next story in order. And so it'd be like you could already have your next sprint ready to cut, but indicated what the global priority for a team was for any given ticket.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So they were really built more towards really project management rather than product management with a backlog.
Yes, 1,000%. And they've tried to do some things to help improve that. Like the concept, they recently rolled out priority and severity as two new field types that can be added to tickets. And I'll be interested to see what they do with these fields. But at the moment, there's no way really yet to sort or filter based on these that still doesn't make the state the primary thing that you're filtering against. And so they need to think a little bit deeper about the views that they create now based on the data that they have for each story.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And then as far as the tickets that are making up that backlog, how is the configuration of those? Are they giving you fields such as state and effort and value and PM priority? Do you get all that configuration that comes along with it?
Yeah. So, I mean, I would say that ticket templates are probably one of the things that I would highlight is one of the best things that they do is each team has the ability within their workflow to make ticket customizations to add those points that you're talking about, or choose to limit the ones that aren't valuable to them. And then really be able to also create, boilerplate to those tickets as well to help guide the team on what a good acceptance criteria or description even looks like. And so
cool.
It's really, I feel like, nice for my more junior PMs when they can pull their ticket up and it's like, oh, okay, I need to remember that I've got to add this and I got to add this and I've got to add this so that this ticket meets the definition of ready for grooming.
Oh, that's very helpful. Nice. And then something that goes along with that, are there any analytic capabilities in terms of dashboarding or issue tracking, measuring performance? Is there anything in there for that?
There is, but that would be another one of my gripes is that their dashboards aren't highly customizable. And so we find it a lot easier to pull that stuff on the back end and build whatever we're looking for if we have a nuanced view. But, if I wanted to say in a sprint, for example, how much work was tied to X epic versus Y epic from a points complete, Shortcut doesn't have a good way for me to do that without me just pulling out a piece of paper and doing the math myself.
Oh, gotcha. And then in terms of product strategy, are you using something like ProdPad or AHA to do your product strategy, product vision work? Or
No, unfortunately, I think we're doing all of that in Google Sheets at the moment. And so we're doing all of that right now. Our executives like looking at slide decks and like looking at roadmaps and sheets. And so we still will do that there, but we're trying now with like initiatives and intake and things that are coming in at that higher level, building more long-term roadmaps right now through Shortcut and modeling those requests. But the issues with prioritization that I was just talking about would also go further into epics and initiatives, and those have the similar difficulties. And so we're struggling to get it there where we can use Shortcut as the source of truth for that. But that's the desire right now, is to even let Shortcut own more of the product strategy piece rather than finding another tool.
Right. That's cool. So you didn't use necessarily their customer success or for the implementation, but in terms of ideas and feedback, obviously there's things about it that you think could be improved. What are maybe 3 things that if you could speak with them or you could offer feedback or ideas, I know we mentioned quite a few of them, but like, what are maybe 3 things that you would really highlight?
Okay, yeah, the 3, and I was thinking about this a lot. One of my biggest gripes, and this is a personal user thing, I am a guy that opens way too many tabs when I work. It's just part of my
problem. We're all victims of that.
You're not alone.
And so Shortcut hangs, unfortunately, really poorly sometimes when you have 15 tabs of Shortcut open on big data views all of a sudden you can get connection timeouts because literally you're asking it to process so much data in real time that all of your shortcut tabs will die on you. And so thinking about a better way to handle like real-time updates versus letting something be on a paused update, or choosing when to sync the data, I think is definitely would be a useful feature and definitely make me a little less annoyed when it hangs or tabs die on me. I also think it needs a better Gantt chart view. That's something that like the roadmap view we're using, and we're using epics on the roadmap view to simulate a Gantt chart. But it would be really nice if they could spend some more time to thoughtfully think about the entire SDLC process and give us the ability to have things like user acceptance modeled inside the roadmap, or to be able to have places to really think about, more longer term project planning. And then I think the last thing that I would say is there's not enough features when it comes to like remote and offshore team management. And so when I throw in somebody that's, working with us overseas into the space because of how guided or how much guidance we have to provide to get Shortcut to be working for somebody, a language barrier can make that even more difficult. And so I almost need like a simplified view version of Shortcut that would be for somebody that's just trying to push like a Kanban style tickets, if you will, that was just had a limited set of features and could be able to just keep devs focused when they don't necessarily need all of that visibility.
Oh, that's really interesting. Underneath their features on their site, they actually say solutions by team, engineering, product, and remote. So that's interesting that they highlighted here, but maybe that's an area they
it's
can
still
improve
not
on.
there in my opinion. I've tried the remote team features, and it's the remote time tracking isn't really there yet. There's a bunch of pieces where I think they want to go that way, but they haven't developed the product yet.
It's interesting that you mentioned Gantt chart as one of the items, because to some product managers, Gantt chart is almost like a curse.
Yeah.
So,
well, yeah, I mean, but it's the curse that your executive team always asks for. So I'd at least like a tool that could be able to build it for me quickly, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So next thing, 3 things that you really like about it or that you enjoy using about it.
Yeah, so we already talked about the ticket template, so that definitely is something to call out. I really, really like how powerful those are. The spaces view, which allows for you to create different visuals, kind of like a Trello board based on different state, is also very powerful for like your stand-ups or for just keeping track of different teams at different levels. And so being able to use those to aggregate teams across multiple spaces for me as a director is really nice. And then my favorite feature without a doubt is the power bar. And so they have something that's kind of like a pop-up terminal interface that you can gain access to through the question mark button. And this will allow for you to be able to quickly do commands in Shortcut, or be able to pull up different views, or be able to auto migrate a bunch of tickets or edit. And so it could be better documented, but it's very powerful once you start to learn how to use it.
Okay. That brings to mind a question I've asked is around queryability. I like JQL from Jira. You're probably familiar with that. Does that have any of that?
Yeah, it very much does. That's very like embedded inside the power bar is features very similar to that.
Yeah, I think that's something that is, underutilized by people, but I think it's really powerful, especially when your backlog can get pretty unwieldy. And so I think that's a key feature to have. So excellent. So I guess with all these things, would you say Shortcut, if you could do it over again, the migration from Jira to Shortcut, would you do that? Would you do that again? Or would you look at maybe some other products on the market?
I think I would have personally liked for us to have done a deeper analysis of the options we had on the market. Quite honestly, at the moment we knew that we needed to leave Jira, but we knew we needed to leave it with too much haste. And so I think we were not willing to really evaluate all of the different platforms in the marketplace. And quite honestly, the space evolved so quickly that, there's a good case behind every 2 to 3 years looking over all the platforms in the market and determining which one is going to be the right solution for your team going forward. And it seems like in our own organization, we're starting to have some appetite for that as we look at ending the year and thinking about, as we look at 2023, what's the platform tool that we're going to use to get us to the next level as an organization. But I mean, that's just a classic who moved my cheese kind of question.
That's awesome. I think that's part of the goals that our show is trying to offer to listeners, is trying to just expose everyone to, as all the different products that are on the market. There's so many out there, and trying to like lower the noise, the volume down a little bit. So,
and like you mentioned in the beginning, not every tool fits every team in a certain time of their life, because they're changing and evolving and whatever it is. So it's a really good point what you just said, that you can reevaluate it. You don't have to be married to a specific tool just because everyone is using it or because it's used for some time. But
you're not stuck with something forever. So CJ, this has been a pleasure. Where can people reach you if they want to learn more?
Probably the best place to reach me is through my LinkedIn, or hit me up with a message to my email at clay.burns@rewardstyle.com. And that's Clay Burns on LinkedIn as well.
Thank you so much again, Moshe. Hope you feel better.
Thank you so much.
Please recover well.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you to all the listeners, and we'll talk to you next time.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Take care.